My guest at this time is Jessica Vaughn. She's the Director of Policy Studies at the Center for Immigration Studies in Washington. We want to get her insights on two major immigration-related stories. First of all, the caravan, or at least the group of asylum seekers, depending on how you describe them, amassed in Tijuana now, looking to get into the United States, and how that's being processed and how it should be processed, as well as the funding debate over whether or not President Trump will get money to at least begin building the wall that he wants along the southern border. So, Jessica, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Glad to talk with you.
Well, there's obviously been a lot of attention towards these migrants that have been coming towards the U.S. border. We've been following it for a number of weeks now. It also gained a lot of attention when some tear gas was used as some of these migrants tried to rush the border and were throwing rocks at Border Patrol agents and so forth. And the images and the stories of the tear gas use and so forth has been described as not who we are, even though there have been some reports that have shown that the Obama administration did the same thing and in some cases did it to a greater extent. So what is it that you think people don't understand most about immigration law and what really happens along the border?
Well, I think most people were horrified at the spectacle of these folks in the caravan kind of rushing the border and threatening Border Patrol agents, as well as threatening the integrity of our immigration system. Most Americans can't imagine engaging in that kind of behavior themselves. We should be all proud of our Border Patrol agents for their restraint in dealing with this very explosive situation where they used tear gas rather than more lethal force, which could have been, an outcome that would have been very, much more troublesome, I think, to people. I think that's the image that most Americans are carrying about this is that, our Border Patrol agents did a great job in defending our border, that this caravan is a problem, and they are clearly not all peaceful asylum seekers, that these are people who are just bent on getting into the United States, and that this is not just a bedraggled group of refugees. This is people who are demanding a right to enter the United States to work or to come here for other purposes, which hopefully would not involve criminal activity, although certainly we know that some people in the group are coming here because they've been deported before as criminals or because they're planning on joining up with criminal organizations here in the United States. That's not the majority, obviously, but when you have an unsettled situation like this where people are rushing the border, inevitably there are people within that who are looking to cause trouble. And some of them got through. Not many, but some of them did succeed in slipping by the Border Patrol. But this is, I don't think this is helping the narrative of the caravan. And even the people of Tijuana are getting tired of this and want these folks to go back home or accept some kind of status in Mexico. But it's becoming very disruptive.
Jessica, just to clarify for folks who don't know or would like to know more, what is the Trump administration doing that's different than what previous administrations have done in this sort of situation?
They are doing some different things. For one thing, they have surged resources to the border, not only reassigned Border Patrol agents and Customs and Border Protection inspectors who are not usually apprehending illegal aliens, but they man the ports of entry. They've surged resources there, and they have also enlisted the help of the U.S. military in putting up additional barriers at the border itself to reinforce the outdated barriers that are there now, and that's what the president is seeking funding for. There is now razor wire in places along the border where people have successfully gotten through our controls, like under bridges and in just aging fencing that's there. And they also have said that if you cross illegally into the United States, you're not going to be able to ask for asylum. And they're controlling the number of people who are allowed to come to the legal port of entry to make asylum claims. And this is very important to understand because folks who are against strict immigration enforcement have tried to say that these people should all be given asylum and protection in the United States, that they're fleeing oppression and persecution. In fact, what we know from the last few years of experience is that most of the people who are coming this way are not qualified for asylum. If we let them in for asylum and release them into the United States, half of them do not ever even fill out an asylum application, much less show up for their court hearings. And even if they do, only about 10 to 20% of them are found qualified for asylum by an immigration judge. This is people taking advantage of what have been very lenient catch and release policies at the border, where people who come and say that they fear return are simply, for the most part, allowed into the United States and released.
Which leads to another.
They end up joining the illegal population. They're not actually seeking asylum. They're just trying to get into the United States. So the Trump administration has said, enough. We're just not going to admit unlimited numbers of people this way.
So that leads to another major point in this debate that I know CIS is very much in favor of this policy, and that's making those seeking asylum or entry to the United States for whatever reason as part of this group stay in Mexico while the claims are being processed.
Yes, reportedly that is a policy that the Trump administration is looking at implementing. They want to say, okay, we can accept more asylum applications at the legal port of entry, but people will not be let into the country. They will be told to wait for the adjudication of their asylum claim in Mexico. So, and that is a really a good policy to adopt. We've done this years ago when we've had similar situations in the 1990s, and it worked. It really provides a disincentive for people to come to just, use our generous asylum system to try to get into the United States to live here and make these frivolous asylum claims. We want to be able to help people who are genuinely facing persecution or some other problem in their homeland, but that's, not everyone qualifies for asylum. It can't be based on generalized violence or difficult conditions. It's for people who are actually getting persecuted personally by the government. So that's what the administration is trying to say, we're not going to put up with this anymore. And, it's really wrong for us to have a policy that encourages people to make this dangerous trip through Mexico to try to claim asylum. They're bringing children now because they know that has been something that gets them into the United States, that we're not going to detain people who come with kids. And until we change our policies so that people to make it much harder for people to exploit the loopholes in our law, or until Congress changes the law, we're going to see a continuation of this. And that's why it's important for the Trump administration to try to address both the asylum claims and the vulnerabilities of the physical border itself.
We're talking with Jessica Vaughn, Director of Policy Studies at the Center for Immigration Studies. And Jessica, last question on this front, and you addressed it a little bit in one of your previous responses, but given all the criticism of how the Trump administration is handling this, based on your read of their criticism, how do they really want something like this to be handled, if they're being honest?
Well, that's it. I mean, whether it's the Border Patrol and the use of tear gas, I guess they would prefer lethal force or just, standing down. That's not a solution. People in favor of this really want everyone who presents themselves at the border to be let into the country. They think that we should essentially have open borders and let people in. And if they are seeking asylum, we should say, it's fine for them to be able to work here for years at a time. And we should, pretty much be as generous as possible in awarding green cards based on asylum. What they don't talk about is whether there should be any limits to that. It's as if there's the assumption that we can take in as many people as want to come here, that should be completely unlimited. But of course, that's not realistic in any way. I think the reason we have this caravan today in such a large number, 10,000 people, is because the hundreds of people who came in a caravan in the spring were let in. So, anytime that we really pretty much open the doors, we find that inspires more migration to the United States. And it's just not sustainable for our communities or for our economy.
Jessica, real quickly on the appropriations debate, the president has said he's willing to entertain a government shutdown if he doesn't get the funding that he wants to begin construction of the border wall along our southern border with Mexico. He wants $5 billion in this budget deal. Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Senate Democrats, is taking heat for being willing to offer $1.6 billion, which his office is trying to clarify now doesn't actually refer to the wall, but border security in general. So how significant should this fight be for those in favor of enhanced border security? I know that Center for Immigration Studies believes that addressing policies like chain migration and so forth is more significant than physical border security. But given that that's where we are in this debate right now, how hard should the president and his allies be fighting for this?
Well, the president needs to fight very, very hard for this. He needs to go to the mat for this and needs to send the signal that he's going to veto any spending bill that doesn't give him the resources to solve this problem, because Americans have witnessed what's happened and are concerned about this affront to our sovereignty and want to see an end to this abuse of our asylum system. So politically, it's a good move, and it's a good move for the security of our country. I do think that the deal needs to be more simplified than some of the proposals that have been considered in the past, because it's going to be difficult to pass a big bill that tries to do too much. On the other hand, if the Republicans don't get their act together and come together on something in the next couple of weeks, in January, the Democrats take over the House, and they will be able to get nothing through that enhances border security or increases immigration enforcement. So they need to find a way to get a small list of things done now.
Jessica?
And that would include border security and the wall.
Wow. A lot to keep track of on multiple fronts here. Thanks, as always, for helping us understand it better.
Thank you.
Jessica Vaughn is Director of Policy Studies at the Center for Immigration Studies. I'm Greg Corombos reporting for Radio America.